I feel like this title is kind of familiar. This live stream is based off of my most recent article for Freedomists, which is the organization that I write for. It's a young conservative organization. I'm going to link it below in case you want to read it. So first, starting off, when the Republicans won in 2016, the Senate and the White House, it became very clear that they did not have a plan to actually repeal and replace Obamacare. Kind of shocking, seeing as they ran on repealing and replacing it for 6 years. But when they got in there, it became clear not only did they not have a health care plan, they hadn't even prepared for Republicans to win. Now, I'm telling you this because I feel like this is a marker of what's to come if Joe Biden wins. If Joe Biden becomes the president-elect and then president, we're not only dealing with his policies, we're dealing with a comprehensive, extremist, liberal legislative agenda that will be pushed through on the federal and state level. And based off of the failures we've seen with Republicans to adequately come up with plans like tackling Obamacare in the 6-year interim they had to do it, I have very little faith that the Republican Party is ready to actually stop the progressive liberal legislative agenda that Joe Biden will champion and sign off on. Because if you look at what Republicans were like in 2013, people like Ted Cruz and the conservative organizations that pushed for the government shutdown over Obamacare, if you look at the boldness that took, and you look at how many times Ted Cruz got hit by conservative and liberal media, think about if you believe that Republicans who are afraid to oppose statues being torn down, if you think those Republicans are going to be as bold as they were in 2013 to stop this progressive liberal legislative agenda, I don't think they will. The harbinger that I see with the Obamacare issue is that it wasn't even that McCain gave the thumbs down. It was why he gave the thumbs down, aside from disliking Trump. Republicans, Paul Ryan, who'd been there a long time, the RNC, there was no plan in place to actually repeal and replace Obamacare. Not even just repealing it, but what they were going to offer instead of it. There was no legislation really prepared. Based off of that, I doubt that there's a plan in place to stop a liberal legislative agenda if Joe Biden's inaugurated. Think about it this way. Liberals, even when they're fighting for whatever they're fighting for, all of their legislative promises, whether it's abortion or gun control or any of the things they want in foreign policy, there's a media campaign designed behind all of them, especially with abortion and being anti-gun. There's all these media campaigns. I don't think Republicans are ready with the same level of campaigning. How are we going to stop a liberal legislative agenda if we don't hold the White House or the Senate? Because I think if we lose the White House, we probably will lose the Senate as well, just how it goes, and we won't have the House. How will we do that? I don't see that plan. So start to think about when you hear Republicans say, well, if we lose, the presidency, if we lose to Biden, we'll talk about how we can reshape the Republican Party. How will you stop Biden from rolling back every abortion restriction on federal and state levels? How will you stop a gun control legislative agenda? How will that happen? Because if Republicans have to spend 6 months walking around in a panic, and I mean elected Republicans, not you and I, but elected Republican leaders, if they have to spend 6 months walking around in a panic and having emergency meetings to try to come up with a plan to stop a progressive legislative agenda from being enacted in this country, the fight will be over before Biden's even inaugurated. We don't have time. If the election's held on November 3rd, the elected Republicans' plan to stop a progressive legislative agenda has to go in effect November 4th. I don't know how that can happen because we have so much division in the conservative movement. And I personally believe, seeing what we saw with Obamacare and the huge letdown that was and how much that fractured our party, that elected Republicans are not prepared with a real plan to stop a progressive legislative agenda. They're too much that they think they're going to win everything. And even if they don't, they're focused on winning an election, but not necessarily stopping the efforts Joe Biden will do even as a puppet. Thank you, everyone. Please retweet this, share this, and think about when you hear Republicans say, well, if we lose, we'll take a look at why we lost and we'll win back supporters. Do you ever hear them say, this is how we will stop the abortion agenda? This is how we will stop the ridiculous namby-pamby foreign policy crusade of Joe Biden and Barack Obama? How will they do that? And if you're saying, well, they shouldn't give their plan, do they even talk about opposing it, or do they just talk about waiting it out and using it as a fundraiser effort like we've seen them do with a lot of the rioting and issues that are going on right now? Thank you, everyone. Please retweet this, share this, and spread it out. Have a good night.